For this project you will need decor yarn and a 3mm crochet hook, a 14cm diameter ring, something to cut the yarn with, and a tapestry needle, and a 45cm stick to hang it on. We're going to start this project with a magic circle or a magic ring, and we're going to make 6 puff stitches into this magic ring. So we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook, go through the ring, pull up a loop, and do that 5 times. 2, and then 3, 4, and 5, and then pull through all the loops on your hook and then close that shut. Now that's not classed as a chain, it's just to close the puff stitch, and we're going to make 5 more. So you're going to pull 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then pull through all the loops on the hook and then close it shut. Do 4 more times. I've got my 6 puff stitches, and then you can pull the tail to close it shut, and then we're going to make a slip stitch to the top of the first puff stitch of the round. For round 2 we're going to chain 2, and we're going to put 2 double crochets into that same stitch, and then 2 double crochets in between the puff stitches. So it's 2 double crochet in each stitch around, which will bring you up to 24 stitches. Finishing off this round with 2 double crochet in between the first puff stitch and the last puff stitch. And then slip stitch into the beginning of the round. You can always count 24 stitches backwards, and then you'll know where to put your slip stitch. Round 3 is another puff stitch round, so we're going to do a puff stitch into that same stitch. Then close your puff stitch, and then chain 2, skip a stitch, and then repeat that around. Puff stitch, chain 2, skip a stitch, and then another puff stitch. Remember that the puff stitch closing stitch does not class as a chain. So it's puff stitch, chain 2, skip stitch, and another puff stitch. And you repeat that all the way around for a total of 12 puff stitches. I will finish this round and I'll meet you back here. Finishing my last puff stitch with a chain 2, and then slip stitch into the top of the first puff stitch of the round. Round 4 we'll chain 1, then single crochet into that same stitch on top of the puff stitch, then 3 single crochets in between the puff stitches, and you're going to repeat this around. A single crochet on top of the puff stitch, and then 3 single crochets in between, for a total of 48 stitches. I will finish this round and I will meet you back here. Feel free to pause or rewind at any time of this video if it's going too fast or too slow, and also on the top right corner you can change the speed of the video. Slip stitch back to the first stitch of the round. Round 5 we'll start with chain 3, and this chain 3 classes as a double crochet, and we're going to do a double crochet into that same stitch. Then chain 1, skip a stitch and do double crochet, chain 1, double crochet into that same stitch. And we're making V stitches around for this round. So it's double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, chain 1, skip a stitch and repeat that. We're skipping a stitch and then double crochet, chain 1, another double crochet in the same stitch, and then chain 1, skip a stitch and repeat that around. Just doing my last V stitch. And then slip stitch into the second chain from that 3 chain that we made at the beginning. It might look a bit ruffled, but it will straighten out once we continue it. Chain 1, that's round 6. 2 single crochet into the V stitch, and then 1 single crochet in between. So that's 2 single crochets into the V stitch and then 1 single crochet in between, and repeat that around. So finishing off my last 2 single crochets and then slip stitch to the beginning of the round. Round 7 is another puff stitch round, so we're going to place a puff stitch into the same stitch. And then chain 1, skip a stitch and place another puff stitch in the next stitch. So this round is puff stitch, chain 1, skip stitch, puff stitch. You should have 36 puff stitches at the end of this round. So finish your round and we'll meet at the end. Slip stitch to the top of the first puff stitch of the round, and this is what it looks like. Grab the ring, and the last round we're going to do around the ring. So place the ring over your project where the yarn tail comes from behind and your work is at the front, and then slip stitch on the ring. And then we're going to make, for round 8, we're going to single crochet on top of the puff stitch and then 2 single crochets in between. Now you can alternate doing 2 single crochets or 3 single crochets in between the puff stitches, so it will fill out the gaps. It doesn't really matter how many you do. You can do 3 if it doesn't ruffle for you. I did 2 single crochets and then 3 single crochets twice. Just remember to do a single crochet on top of the puff stitch. So you can do single crochet on top of the puff stitch and then 2 single crochets in between, and then single crochet on top of the puff stitch and then 3 single crochets in between. So it's up to you. It will just fill out the gaps and it will stretch out the work to attach it to it. Finishing this round with 3 single crochets in the last space, and then I'll slip stitch into the first single crochet of the round. Then pull your yarn through and leave yourself a comfortably long tail to tie with. And then make 2 more. Now we're going to make the littlest circle, the smallest one. We're going to start off with a magic ring. And then we're going to place 6 puff stitches into this magic ring. So you do this round and I will meet you at the end when you have 6 puff stitches. I have my 6 puff stitches. I'm going to pull the tail to close it shut and make a slip stitch into the top of the first puff stitch of the round. Then we're going to chain 1 and place 2 single crochets into that same stitch, and then 2 single crochets in between the puff stitches. So that's 2 single crochets in every stitch around for a total of 24 stitches. Finish this round and I'll meet you at the end. Doing my last 2 single crochets in between the first puff stitch and the last puff stitch, and then slip stitch into the first single crochet of the round. Then pull your tail through and leave a longish tail. And make 3 more. Or if you want to make more, then you're more than welcome. But I made 4 altogether. Now to the medium circle, which is made of the first 2 rounds of the small circle, which is 6 puff stitches into the magic ring and then a round of 2 single crochets in each stitch around with 24 stitches. So if you want to pause the video and do that, or go back and watch how you do it, then you can. I will meet you at the end of round 2. Just closing this round off with a slip stitch. And for round 3, we're going to make some petals. So we're going to chain 2, and we're going to make 3 partially made double crochets. So you wrap round and then you're going back down into the same stitch, pull up a loop and then go through 2 loops, and then you're going to do that again. You're going to wrap round, go into the same stitch, pull up a loop and go through 2 loops. Now you have 3 loops on the hook. Do that one more time. Pull up a loop, go through 2. Now you have 4 loops on your hook. Wrap round and pull through all 4 loops on your hook and then close it. And that's your first petal. Now we're going to chain 2, skip a stitch and make another petal in the next stitch. So go and start in double crochet, pull through 2 loops, do that again, pull up a loop, pull through 2 loops, one more time, pull through 2 loops, and again you do that 4 times, pull through 2 loops until you have 5 loops on your hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull the yarn through all 5 loops on your hook and then close it shut. Chain 2. then you skip a stitch and make another petal. So your petals are made from 4 partially made double crochets until you have 5 loops on your hook, and then you pull the yarn through all 5 loops on your hook, and then you close it shut, and then chain 2, skip stitch, and repeat the process. And you will have 12 petals on this round. So you do that and I'll meet you at the end. Finishing off my last petal with chain 2, then slip stitch onto the top of your first petal of the round. Round 4, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to make 2 single crochets on top of that petal, and then 3 single crochets in the gaps in between the petals. That's 2 single crochets on top of the petal and 3 single crochets in between. So do this round and I will meet you at the end. Finishing the round with 3 single crochets in the last gap, then slip stitch into the first stitch of the round. Pull your yarn through and cut a long tail. Now, after leaving the project on the wall overnight just so I can see how I like it, I ended up making 7 of these medium rounds, medium circles. It does show 5 on here, but I ended up making 7. You can do as many or as little as you want. I ended up making 7. After you put them on the project, you can arrange them however you want, but this is how I ended up arranging them. Now we're going to sew in all the lovely ends that we have, or you can always sew them as you go, but I'm going to do that right now, and I will meet you when all my ends are sewn in. So after you've finished with all your ends, now we're going to connect the large circles. Leave your tails pointing up and we're going to count inwards. We're going to count 11 stitches from the middle one, from the outer circle, and then 8 stitches on the inner circle. And then we're going to connect them together with a marker. Almost forgot what it's called for a second. And we're going to sew this over 3 of those buff stitches space, just so it's got a bit of connection. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Place another marker there, just line them up that they match in. Recounting again, just double checking. And then put the marker there. And same on this side, we're going to sew over 3 puff stitches. Now we're going to take some new yarn tail to sew them together. Now there's not going to be any fancy stitching here. I'm just going to go from one side to the other where the marker was. You can either leave your marker in or take it out. I'm going from left to right through the stitches. Very simple. And I'm going to do that over a space of where your 3 puff stitches are. And one more stitch, then you can pull both tails just to tighten it. And then I'm going to take my yarn to the back from one of the sides, and then we're going to tie it round the back afterwards. Now we're going to do the same on the other side. Take fresh yarn, and I've sewn this as well over 8 stitches. And just pull your yarn tail to the back through one of the sides. Depending on what side you started sewing on. And then turn your project onto its front, and then you can tie those 2 ends together. Just don't pull it too tight because it will crimp it up. Just tight enough that it's not going to come loose. Then you can either sew your ends in, or you can cut them like I did, and then do the same on the other side. Now I apologise, but I forgot to film this part where I tied it onto the stick. But I used a 45 centimetre more or less stick and just did normal 2 or 3 knots, just normal knots to tie it onto the stick. Now I'm going to show you how I'm putting these circles. As I said, you can hang them wherever you want, how many you want, but that's why I left it overnight, just to see how I like it to be hung. So I was basically playing around with those circles quite a bit. It was very tempting for my 2-year-old not to pull on the strings. That was funny. So I sort of eyeballed it. I looked onto the center of the circle, sorry, the middle of the last row, and I put the middle circle in, and then I count 11 stitches, and then I come from the back of the 12th stitch onto the front, and then I pull the tail through round to the back. And you do the same on the other side. You go from the middle one and you count 11 stitches, and then you come from behind the 12th stitch to the front, and then you pull the tail through. I have 5 large circles, well, medium circles, and 4 small ones. That's why I said I ended up doing 2 more. So once you're happy with where they are, then you can do a double knot and cut the tail. Just leave a little bit to sew in at the back. Just going to take that tail and just pull it through the middle of one of the stitches right next to it, where it looks like it's coming up to, and then I'm just going to weave it only slightly at the back, and then I'm going to cut the tail off, just so you're not going to see it. Then I'm going to do that on all the tails, and then I'll see you when you've done that. So for the hanging string, I ended up doing a chain of 65, and then I tied it onto the stick. Obviously you can do however long of a chain that you want, and then I tied it up onto the stick and used super glue to secure it onto the stick so it's not sliding from side to side. Then leave a tail for tying. So to tie it onto the stick, I wrapped the tail round the stick twice, and then I pulled it through the first chain closest to the stick, and then I did a double knot, even a triple knot will be okay, and then I cut the tail, and then I did the same onto the other side. And that's it, we're done. I really hope you enjoyed making this, and yours looks as beautiful as mine came out. Quite surprised myself with this one. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.